There is no need to be terrified of the collapse of the United States empire. Gentlemen, most of you are in an empire, and your nation has been suppressed by that empire for your entire existence. And you probably haven't even been allowed to understand that you're a people group separate from this American nonsense. Now, that's not to say there isn't a heritage America. There is. The northern 13 colonies would be heritage America. I mean, the antebellum South has clearly shown that they are a separate people, or otherwise the Civil War wouldn't have happened. And the fact is, ever since the Civil War, the Union, the United States, has been an empire because you're not allowed to leave. Empires make you stay because they want your wealth, they want your power, they want to send your boys off to fight and die in weird places so they can get more wealth and power and force those people and blah 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 blah. You see where we're getting at here. So, by every definition, the United States was an empire after the Civil War. Now, if you like these kinds of discussions and want to hear more sincere hope about the future for Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all the rest, park it here. Like, subscribe, share. My name's Aaron Dowdy, aka Heartbeat Grizzly, and I'm going to be making videos like this, and I do sermons on Sundays and Sunday school on Mondays, just to be nice and confusing. But let's get back to the topic at hand. So, the United States, even just core United States, we're not even talking about its false empire building and kind of semi-conquering of the European states after World War II. You could say, oh, we were never part of the U.S., the European Union says, even as they're bullied and pushed into like every conflict the U.S. ever got into after that. But we'll call them satellite states after World War II. And they became that because they were scared of Russia, or more accurately, the Soviet Union at the time. And there is a difference. There is a very big difference between the Soviet Union and Russia. Mostly because the Soviet Union was created by people who weren't Russian, funny enough. I mean, you just look at the core leaders, Stalin, Lenin. Stalin was a Georgian. Lenin, where was Lenin from? I forget where he was from, but it wasn't Russia. And Trotsky, a Jew, right? All these people made the Soviet Union, and unsurprisingly, were very comfortable with killing millions of Russians because they weren't Russian, and many of them hated Russians. It's a funny thing how that works. There's something to remember when things are getting hairy in an empire, all right? And that's your people. You might be proud of what you've accomplished within the empire, but in the end, that empire has existed to control your people and stop you from becoming a nation, or becoming a nation again if you were conquered. Now, that's not to say that the American Empire didn't have some good times, but most of it was a farce. Absolutely. I get kind of annoyed at people who wish they were living in the 1950s, or kind of think whimsically about the 80s or the 90s. They're getting a lot of this now. And I want to slap these people because these times, sure, though they were wealthier, had a lot of fun stuff to do, blah, blah, blah. It was a lot safer. You weren't getting shanked on buses because you were blonde and a girl, right? It was a farce. It was a lie. We were blind to the obvious problems underneath the surface that were boiling up. Our leaders were serving weird dark gods, and you might think, oh, now you're getting out of the political spectrum, you're getting more into conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. It's not, at this point, it's not a conspiracy. Yes, it is in the sense that they conspire to hide what they truly worship, but there's been leaks on their emails going all the way back to 2016. Oh, it's a joke. It's a joke that Hillary Clinton said when she told her staff that she was going to make another sacrifice to Moloch. Look, it was a lie. These time periods, we were sold a lie, and we've paid for it. And that was the start of the lie. We were made weak, and we allowed ourselves to become weaker, and we were too cowardly to fight back, and that angers me. Like, particularly, I can go farther back. I'm reading about Rhodesia and their, over enthusiastic want to join World War II and World War One for the British, and they were pretty much British at that point. They're the African British, if you were. They weren't Boers though. They were more British settlers than anything else. That probably went over a lot of your guys' head. Boers is Dutch, so the Dutch started an African colony. The British conquered it. Blah 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 blah. So Dutch Boer. That's why a lot of South Africans kind of have that interesting twang to their accent that you can't quite match. It's because it's mixing Dutch and British and African, Afrikaner, and all this other stuff. So fun stuff. And I say that to point out they were enthusiastic about going for the Empire and all the rest. And the Empire helped them make a wonderful home in Rhodesia. Uh, Dealt with some crazy savages, but that Empire was now having them not fight savages, but fight their fellow Christians, who were had their own forcing them to fight their fellow Christians over a lot of nonsense. Like the reasons for World War One get more and more ridiculous the more you actually look at them. Not least of the fact that the three main leaders, uh, the King of England, the Tsar of Russia, and the Kaiser, were all related. They were cousins. So it makes even less sense why they were battling it out and why one was pushing against the other. Why was Germany trying to make a massive navy to counter the British Navy, and on and on and on. And it just kind of boiled down to ridiculous nonsense. I'm getting lost in the weeds, but what I was trying to lay out there was empire will make you do stuff that's not in your best interest. Like going and fighting a war against your fellow man and fellow Christians, particularly. Not the savage, not the dark worshipping weirdo who's sacrificing children in the corner. No, 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 no. Going to fight guys who would probably just be making something at the Vestergarden or something. There's no real conflict there. You guys can civilize the world together. You don't need to be blasting each other apart over a guy getting assassinated in a country you've never been to before, right? There was all this propaganda, like they were saying that the Germans were stabbing babies in Belgium. Like, can you think of something more ridiculous? And even now, occasionally, they try to villainize the World War One Germans. It's probably one of the most silly things you've ever heard. The worst you could say is they were a little more empirical, like a little more totalitarian, and that's the best you can get. The US's collapse seems like the end of the world to the boomer, to the Gen Xer, and to the Eureka millennial because they don't have a concept to imagine a world without it, right? It's the end of the world to them because the Empire, the Pax Americana is all they know. And it's funny how much like the collapse of Rome is compared to. But what came out of the collapse of Rome? Like I just brought. No, I didn't bring it up in this recording. They brought up the Spain, England, France. Not quite directly, but eventually Russia. The Slavic, not Slavic. Excuse me. The Scandinavian kingdoms, because eventually they would be brought into Christianity through the various kingdoms that become Christian after the fall of Rome and all the rest. And ironically, Vikings were more pirate-like, and it's hard to explain to people who don't actually look at the history. They weren't that crazy soldiering boys that you think. They were actually more like ruffians. They'd come in, they'd say, "Hey, bribe us to leave," and they usually didn't actually want to fight. They ironically became much more dangerous when they became Christians, when they became Normans, when they became the Swedish Empire. They were far more dangerous, far more capable of winning battles and conquering peoples with a whole lot less. It's a little thing that people don't want to talk about. I mean, even the Viking, the one that you hear the most stories about, right? He was a Christian Viking who fought for the Byzantines. Um, I'm getting lost in the weeds again. I'm trying to keep this focus. When you have a balkanization of a large empirical entity, be it Rome, be it Greece, be it Babylon, if we're going to go crazy, right? There's an opportunity for peoples who have been suppressed the entire time to create a new world. There's shakeups like this all the time. Some of them have more instability going into it. Some of them it's a more smooth transition. In a lot of ways, World War II was this, right? There's the American Empire taking domination over the world, essentially, with the Soviet, Russian captured empire taking the rest of the globe. Right? Before that, you had all the different empires. You had the Germany, blah blah blah, all these other empires, and then Japan, and they had their spheres of influences, and they tended to keep each other in check till, you know, my more conspiratorial brothers with me would say, something convinced them to kill each other. But when a big empire collapses, you have a chance to make something in its ashes. And, it looks like Canada's going to collapse too. It's going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong. But there's a chance to build something here. As a Californian, old school Californian, actual Californian, biologically Californian white boy over here, yeah? And again, don't let people confuse you. Spain drew a line saying, "Oh, all of this is ours." Yeah, yeah, but they sent 5 guys and a donkey up there. The vast majority of California was actually settled by the British. British fur tractors up north, and then later big waves of Americans came in after California joined the Union. The southern part of the state was more Spanish. But you actually had a ton of Slavic influence, which is part of the reason why the West Coast man is so different. Is we had Russians mixed into our blood, and a substantial amount of that Slavic blood is there. We have, if you don't believe me, you just look at the map. Look at some of the old names of the towns. They're very Slavic. They're very Slavic sounding, which makes the Western man very different than the rest of the United States. And we've never really been allowed to be a nation, because every time we had a chance, we get slapped around and forced back into an empire, right? Spain starts to collapse. We're like, oh, maybe, hey, what about? And then Mexico comes around. Oh, God. Mexico starts losing its grip, and the U.S. comes around, right? What a pain. And honestly, I really wish that my ancestors had had the cojones, if you will, to break with the Union during the Civil War. Not join with the South, but creating a separate republic on the West Coast. It would have been a lot easier to get British aid if we weren't a slave country. This was the British Empire had it in their mind to split up the United States from, it's rival, take back an old colony, blah, blah, blah. It's a real thing. Don't pretend it wasn't going on. But they couldn't get their public to really get on board with selling them weapons and stuff because the British were against the slave trade. It had spent a long time at this point getting rid of the whole slave trade, and so they weren't going to get the British public on board with that. But guess what? California was a different animal. We didn't have slaves, or at least not a lot of them. We did. This one's kind of funny, and this is something interesting. You need to learn the history of your state and your people, because that's what's going to be the formation after the American Empire collapses. You're not going to rebuild the American Empire. Thank God. Thank God. And don't do that, right? Don't do what so many nations and peoples did after Rome and endlessly try to remake Rome. Stop it. Let it die. let it die. They should have let the Roman Empire die and just concentrate on making their own things. You have no idea. Like the Byzantines, for example, which essentially were Romans, they were just the Greek half of the Roman Empire, uh, wasted so much treasure and effort trying to reconquer all of the Western Empire and all the Gothic kingdoms and stuff. And they had some great campaigns and they wasted a bunch of treasure, and in the end it all failed, and it weakened them to the point that they were conquered by the Muslims and lost everything. And to this day, one of the key cities, because there were three key cities, the three main cities of Christianity, they were Alexandria, Jerusalem to a degree, so four, uh, Rome, and Constantinople. Those were these were the things, and we still don't have Constantinople back, even though the Turks have not been, World War One and World War Two. It goes back to Crimean Wars before this, where the British literally sided with the Turks over the Russians trying to reclaim Constantinople, essentially. And I will always call it Constantinople, and I will never call it Istanbul. They didn't build the city, they squatted on top of it. And that's that. But, you see, you need to start thinking like this. I know I forgot whatever tangent. I didn't complete a thought back there, and I don't remember what it is. Bear with me. It's late at night. My kids are finally in bed, and I'm trying to recover. But you need to start thinking long term and in historical mindsets like this. Give your people a narrative. And yes, you have a people. You have a people. You have a culture, and it is within the American Empire. You might be Heritage America, old Northern 13 colonies. Cool. Do that. Claim that. Get people like you together. Hold on to that. You have a chance now that you're not trying to force all these different peoples to stay under your banner to make something beautiful again. So do that. Don't try to grasp at maintaining the empire and waste all your strength away and risk melting away entirely. You understand? That is the big mistake. And no, do not do that. There's a reason why Italy wasn't able to remake the Roman Empire after, Italy. The Roman Empire wasn't able to reform itself despite every monkey's uncle who took a throne trying to declare themselves emperor for centuries after it fell. And again, the Byzantines. Everyone wants to ignore the Byzantines, who basically thought of themselves as Roman, and they were Roman. West Coast people, we are an ethnic group. We have a different biological history than the rest of America. We are a different people, and we are allowed to exist. You exist. You are not American. You are Californian. You are West Coastian, whatever it is. That's what you are. I don't know how else to say it. You don't have the genetic history. You have extra stuff mixed in. You have Spanish mixed in. You have Slavic mixed in. You have the British mixed in, right? Everyone's got a little bit of that from Heritage America. But again, you have a complete different mix that created you. This is why you're different, right? And I'm talking about cowboy California. And we're talking about California. We're not talking about these Indians who get off the boat and go, "Oh, I'm Californian now." No, HB1 visa, go home, baby. And, and you wouldn't be here if we weren't heating your homes. So shut up. We're talking about the ones who actually built the cities here, who built the cultures here, who had to watch so much of California get destroyed over the years, who had to watch their children get taken in by satanic preschools, and when they try to do something about it, they get labeled as crazy people, and when they get the physical evidence, it's ignored. Yeah, that's the satanic panic for you. All the physical evidence actually pointed to the cults existing and doing disgusting stuff, and they're just labeled and libeled, and the psychologists go, "But that's ridiculous. We don't have any physical evidence, but clearly they're all lying. Let's, listen to us." Everyone did! Ugh, that drives me nuts. I'll have to do another video specifically about the satanic panic because it bothers me. But this goes for all the different groups inside America. right? You guys gotta understand. You're going to be fighting ethnic national wars here, right? The Indians are going to group together. Mexicans are going to group together, probably try to reform the Aztec Empire. You know, blacks are probably screwed in this because they've never, they don't seem to be overly inclined to create proper nations any more than their ancestors and stuff did in Africa. And but they're still going to probably band together, right? You have to band together, but you have to understand it's more than white, right? That's a joke. Let's take. I brought up the black man, right? Is every Nigerian just like every guy who grew up in Queens? Let's be honest. No, not even close. And they all have, even in Africa. Africa's a huge continent, boys. Like I just brought up, the Afrikaners. There's white boys there. Hello, the Arabs more north. You have the sub-Saharan black Africans who are completely different than the Nigerian type Africans. And they're actually, the easiest way to see it and explain it is to look at sports. Like the different races are good at different sports. White people tend to dominate cold sports and swimming sports. Do I really need to explain why? It's like boats and ice have been our thing. It's a thing. Right? If you didn't have the ice, you had the boats if you were a white boy. So it makes sense why we tend to be pretty good at that stuff. While the black people, if you survived, you were outrunning excuse me, lions and stuff. So it makes sense why you can run a long time. I don't know why. It's funny too. I'm not describing evolutionary nonsense. What we're talking about there is just straight up that guy lived. And you say, "Oh, that's not just." I'm getting into the weeds. Blah blah blah. The point is, it stays within the human race. Don't want to talk. It's like how a dog can get crossbred. That's another video in and of itself. But you, sir, wherever you're from, Annabelle himself. My wife keeps. She overheard me and said she wants me to mention the Cajuns. Yeah, you guys. You are separate people with separate genetic lines. That makes you different. And you should be trying to make a nation in the bones of this empire that collapsed. Just like the Gothic nations in Spain, and the British nations, and the French one eventually, and the Germanic principalities that turned into Germany and Russia and all the rest, right? You need to think like that. You are getting ready to go on an adventure of construction and destruction. Don't fixate on the Empire. The Empire, it deserves to die at this point. It deserves to die. There is so much blood on its hands, and I'm not talking about the foreign wars. I'm just talking about the babies being killed in abortion and other crap, right? Just let that entity die. You do not want to have to be punished for the sins of the American Empire. Trust me. You don't want that. Like, there are levels of sin. You have your individual sins, you have your family sins, you have your clan-based sins, you have your people-based sins, your nation sins, and your city sins, and then you have your imperial sins, right? You don't want to be caught up in the imperial sins. So concentrate on building something new that God can bless. And if you make it Christian and good and solid, it will thrive no matter what numbers it faces. Remember, Spain spent 500 years reconquering its peninsula. 500 years. And then they conquered an entire empire of millions with like 500 guys, 500 guys and like 7 horses. Now, to be fair, they had a lot of local help, but that was, those locals were completely docile. Like, they didn't fight the Aztecs for anything, even when like they demanded thousands of sacrifices on a whim. Those are human sacrifices, by the way. Nasty stuff. Also, so full of cannibalism that the Spanish had trouble with their allies stopping mid-battle to start eating dead bodies on the field. you know, and people wonder why I warned them about the rise, rebirth of the Aztec Empire. It's not going to be pretty. And again, this isn't going to be easy. All right. Jeremiah had a prayer, had a message put over him in the beginning of the book. And it's a classic verse you've probably heard all the time, and it says, God says, tells Jeremiah, I'm giving you the power to build and to destroy. To build, misquoting it, but right, you are at that stage where you got two parts in your hand, to destroy and to build up, and you're gonna have to do both. This isn't a I just want to build kind of situation. No, the destruction's going to happen in this construction. You know, just like the seed, right? The outside of the seed had to die so the plant can grow. Destruction's coming. There's no stopping it at this point, but don't be afraid of it, right? You've been terrified by the move, like all the way going back to the boomers. There's been just constant propaganda, just terrifying the population about what happens in imperial collapse. Terrifying. And yeah, in some places it's going to be particularly bad. Certain cities come to mind. Certain places that are very cold during the winter, who are probably going to lose their utilities, they're going to be in a bad time. But there's going to be plenty of great places. Plenty of places that'll grow, plenty of enclaves that'll grow, and it's a time of extreme turmoil and growth. Building something new. You get to be we have a unique opportunity. We can remake society into something that more follows God. Now, this is important because the previous society, the one terrified of nuclear war and all this, was materialistic and claimed Christianity but acted like atheists and didn't think anything spiritual existed, and were so puffed up about the pride and how the world works that even as they broke everything around them, right? We have a chance to make new nations that are closer to an ideal. Not going to be perfect, but closer. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do stupid stuff. But you get to build something. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, a little bit of younger millennials, not as much, but you have a chance to build something. Do not look at the collapse of the United States as just a nightmare. It is a chance to make something beautiful, to make something non-materialistic, to make something for your people. And that's the way you need to look at it. You need to start actually being properly nationalistic. And real nationalistic. The Washington Empire does not deserve your respect, your loyalty, or your honor. It has insulted your God. It has insulted you. It has insulted your children and declared that the world would be better off without you, and enslaves you to debt and replaces you as fast as it possibly can. It deserves nothing from you. Let it die. And make something in its corpse. Beautiful and wonderful. There's a fun imagery in the Bible when Samson kills a lion. And then he comes back on the carcass, and in the middle of the lion, a massive hive of bees has created a home in the destruction. Become that hive. Become a bee, become an insect. No, but you get the point. Make something beautiful in the destruction of the empire, and you have a chance to outshine the American empire. Like, I don't care what people say. Honestly, the Christian kingdoms and the Christian empires that came after it were far better than Rome. They reached far greater distances. It's impressive what Rome created. And it would have been really curious to see what Rome could have done if they had been Christian and not pagan for most of their growth, and weren't already in an uncontrollable decline by the time they became Christian. That's the thing. You have a chance to repent. Repent is like changing the direction on a ship. Let the old world die so you can make something new. And I'm starting to repeat myself, so I'm probably going to end that video there. I hope I can break some of this fear that kind of rests on everything. And it comes from movies and books, like things like The Road and all kinds of zombie movies, right? Where you have this image of societal collapse, people, cannibalism in the woods, like your neighbor is going to eat your dog. Some places, if they're multiracial, will probably turn into that. And it'll probably be pretty nasty, especially when those multiracial places have no food and water and start looking to all the white boy lands to do that. So it's gonna be rough. It was rough during those days, but you can make something beautiful out of it all. And don't be intimidated by the Vikings. Okay? Don't be intimidated by the barbarian. In the end, they're there for the money, food, and stuff, and, you know, rape. And if they don't get those things, and they'll just get deaf instead, then they'll leave. So stay strong. God's got this. You got this. Go to Christ. Be strong. And make something beautiful. Alright. RPG Grizzly, whatever. Logging out. Come back for more of these videos throughout the week. And yeah, check out the sermons on Sundays and the Sunday schools on Mondays. And probably more stuff after that. Okay. See you guys in the next one.